and I understand the conversation you had about all the different systems. It's always difficult because some vendors do not want to work with one another. We've been trying, ideally, to be able to put together with the property record card a copy of the tax bill, the village, the town and county, and the school tax bill. However, the software that we have used for tax collections do not make that available for us, a PDF copy of the actual tax bill. Hopefully in the future we can achieve that. I did also coordinate it with Craig and to display some of the building department information, and we would be able to do it through our GIS system simply if Municity provided us with an index copy of the permits indexed by parcel ID. Unfortunately, between Craig and I, we never got a response from Municity on that, because we are able to display just about anything as long as we're provided with an index copy, PDF file, and then we can link it to our system, and the person, the resident or the title searcher, appraiser, real estate agent would have the option, once they display the parcel, they can see all this. And also, as a reminder, our GIS provides pictometry, aerial view of parcels. And the county recently did a flyover in 2018, and you can go back to a parcel and see what it looks like now in 2018 and how it looks back in 2011, I think, when the first flyover was done. So we have that available. Of course, we use that new pictometry flyover to verify information and correct if necessary. Anyway, enough said about that. But again, I'm a firm believer of having all information available to the public 24/7. So if I can help in that effort, please. As you know, every year since the reassessment in 2016, we make adjustment to the roll to maintain the assessed value the same or as close to market value. So fortunately, in the last 3 years, the market values have increased, and we have been able to book those increases in the rolls, and therefore we have been enjoying the fact that every year we have increased taxable assessed value. This year we have approximately for the village around 60 million, which is on the next report that I'll show you. But as you remember, in the spring, before we published the tentative assessment roll, and by the way, this is also published on the website, we do an analysis of sales, and we adjust the neighborhoods based on the factors increases or decreases. As you can see on this first chart, the village of Ossining, these are the neighborhoods in the village of Ossining, and there is the factor. So for example, the south side for the 17 roll receives 0 increase or changes, but for the 18 roll, we increase the assessed value by 4%. Now this is done based on sales analysis. We take the sales for a period and we analyze it, and based on that, we apply a factor to each of the neighborhoods. Again, let me remind you, each condo complex is its own neighborhood, and as you know, condos is a whole other methodology. As you know, condos are assessed as if they were commercial properties, but this year we also increase the condominiums as well as the commercial properties. So the factors are there each year for the 2 years, and then the culmination of all those increases and decreases, because we did have some decreases in certain parcels, gives us the 2018 assessment roll. And this report shows the taxable assessed value, and then I highlighted the differences as compared to last year. As you can see in the lower part, if you look at the taxable roll section 1, we had a $63 million increase in taxable assessed value. course, we had almost a 2 million reduction in special franchise. So overall, you probably have around a $61 million increase in taxable assessed value. So that would be comparable to having another Harbor Square or 1.5 Avalon complex built. If you look at it that way, like new construction, new tax rateable coming into the village.
So if you take that assessed value and then you multiply times the rate,
that's your $630,000, right? Dale? If you took the taxable value times the rate,
right,
that would be
creating a dollar value for that, the increase to the assessment.
On page 3 of 3, in your summary, the first class is agriculture, then there's residential non-condos. I take that means.
you're looking, by the way, this report is for the whole town.
Okay.
The first page is the village total.
Okay.
Then the next page is the town outside, village of Briarcliff Manor, and the town general is the last page.
Okay.
So to be specific, we can look at the village, which is the first page.
First page.
Yeah, and basically, the first part of this page is by property class, residential, commercial, and then the lower part is by roll section, taxable, special franchise, wholly exempt, etc.
What's an example of a special franchise?
A special franchise, which is roll section 5, would be cables, lines under or above the public right-of-way. So it's usually Verizon, Cablevision, and some of the other smaller cable providers.
Why did it go down? I'm just curious why.
Basically, the methodology for those values and the valuation of those properties are done by the state special valuation unit, and these are based on reproduction cost, new less depreciation. So the main reason they went down is because there hasn't been new lines put in or new
Customers.
new infrastructure put in, and it's mostly the depreciation function of the equipment.
So I just want to understand just what the residential non-condo, residential condo, and the residential RS 3, 5, 7, and 8. Like, what does that actually stand for?
Okay, residential roll section 1 and 6 is taxable and utilities. The residential roll section 3, that's taxable state land. Roll section 5 is special franchise. 7 is ceiling railroads, which we don't have any, and 8 is wholly exempt. Now, our condominiums are in with the commercial 400 class, because our condominiums are valued as if they were an apartment complex. So that's where if you see the 400 class,
That's commercial?
that's commercial. We had an increase of 46 million in the taxable assessed value of those parcels.
So that's a mixture of commercial and condos.
Commercial and condos. The 400 class commercial is your apartment buildings,
Which
your
is the
mixed-use
apartment-
buildings.
Sorry, which is the?
411 is the apartment building.
411.
Mixed-use buildings is 481, 483.
400, so.
Yeah. And then the commercial, the industrial 700 had a slight increase. We don't have many industrial properties.
5.
I'm sorry?
5 parcels.
5 parcels, yes.
So like metallized carbon, is that
Yes.
one parcel?
That's one and one of the biggest, yes.
So residential 200 is basically your single family homes or anything under 6 units. 5 units or below.
Anything up to 3 units.
Up to 3 units.
4 units and up are 411s,
Okay, cool.
commercial.
All right. So single
So that's how we got to that increase in taxable assessed value. Again, as a reminder that when the market goes down, it'll look different because, of course, we will apply a reduction in assessed value, and then you start seeing a decrease in your taxable assessed value, and just by having a decrease in taxable assessed value, that means you're going to have an increase in the tax rate if everything else remained the same. Now, in the old system, when we had equalization rate, the assessed value didn't change much, but the equalization rate changed. And the problem with that basically that assumes that everybody and every property, commercial, residential, goes up and down at the same percentage, and that's
Right,
not
which,
possible.
According to this, is quite different by neighborhood.
Yes,
or
by neighborhood is
development.
quite different, yes.
Now, the way that you split up these classes, is this by New York State taxation? Like, do they
Yes.
set the framework for this?
Yes.
Okay.
This is by New York State real property tax law.
The wholly exempt, we have 2 additional wholly exempt properties this year. I'm gathering one of those is the school on North Island, the residential school that we changed the zoning regulation for.
In North Highland,
The McCluskey School.
uh,
I'm trying to think what.
yeah,
what-
one is,
because Hudson
one
Link was
one
not
is,
this year.
one is the Portuguese club, is wholly exempt now.
It wasn't a year ago?
It wasn't a year ago. They became a 501c3 educational, yes. So this role is the first time it's reflected as a wholly exempt property, and I believe the other one is that school you're referring to,
The one on North Island, the McCluskey School.
yes. And of course, when we do adjustments to the roll, there are changes to the land tables, and the vacant land also shows an increase in taxable assessed value. So the results, after we publish the tentative roll, people have the opportunity to seek administrative review, which is file a grievance and have the board hear their case and consider their case to see, and they determine whether the assessment is fair. If it's not fair, they will approve a change in the assessed value. So the next colorful chart basically is the history since 2012. I present this to you every year. But if you look all the way to the right side, if you look at the 2018, this year we have townwide 449 grievances, which is 131 less than last year, or 23% reduction. If you look at 2016, the first year of the reassessment, we had 625. So the trend, of course, is going down, which is good.
Not as much in the village as
The village of Ossining is only a 10% reduction. We have one company that floods the village with letters, and we have some residents that signs with 2 or 3 of these companies, I gotta tell you. And they don't understand, they just sign on the dotted line, but this company, TRP, is the one that files the most cases, and eventually the most small claims as well.
And you think they're disproportionately targeting the village?
Yes,
Is it a predatory company? Because our population is going to be more subject to predatory
yes.
practices.
I would say so. Many people sign without understanding what they're signing for. We had recently a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, that came to our office, and he wanted out, and he couldn't reach them, and I had Al contact the head person at that company, and they spoke to him, and they withdrew the case. And what happens is many times they don't understand, and if they do get a reduction, eventually they will get a bill from them, for a percentage of the savings, And many times they do not understand, what they're getting into. We always ask residents to come talk to us if you think your assessment is too high. Many people do that. We have hundreds of residents and business owners that we have meetings with them throughout the spring to discuss their assessment, not only residential but also commercial. I expect next year that the commercial property owners, particularly the ones that are going to be impacted by the ETPA, to come forward and hopefully discuss with me their income and expenses, and then we can review their assessment. But some of them, many of them, just hand it off to their attorneys, and their attorneys will file, and when they have 3 or 4 years accumulated, then we sit down through the courts and do the same thing. So, but anyway, after the board reviews the grievances, and we send the board changes of assessment, those petitioners who are not satisfied with the board's decision, they have the right to seek judicial review. The residential property where it's the owner's primary residence, they can file a small claim. Commercial properties file an Article 7 certiorari. So if you go down to the next line, cars, small claims, the total filing this year for small claim was 224 for the townwide, which is a reduction of 52, which is a 19% reduction. For the village of Ossining, there was 103. I know I'm getting, yes, 103, or a reduction of only a 1% reduction.
Where are you looking now? I lost you.
You're looking at scars,
Oh, okay.
okay? So as you can see, while we had an overall reduction, the reduction in the village is not as far as the number. With this year, if you look at the first chart, with the neighborhood adjustment, you can see that we had more activity as far as increases in assessed value in the village, in the different village neighborhoods.
It's actually going up.
And then the next section is the asserts, or the commercial, which is the more impactful. This year we had a total of new certs of 113, and out of those, which is a 56%, a total of 56 less than the prior year, townwide, for a 33% reduction. For the village, we had 64, which is 23 less than last year, or a 26% reduction in certs, new cert this year. And then the next group is total active certs. We take those new certs that were filed this year, this new certiorari, and we add them to whatever we have left from prior years, and this is the accounting of the total certs that we have. Townwide, we have a total of 580 this year as compared to last year,
So that's
which
going
is
up.
26% more.
Why is that going up? Are they taking longer to adjudicate?
Yes, we haven't had, actually, we had a lot of activity this quarter through the courts with trials and court activity, but we did not have many cases that were taken off the list. And by the way, the last group of pages here is, these are the certs for the village.
Remind me, what court hears these?
In White Plains, the Supreme Court, yes. So basically, what I'm saying is that the village of Ossining this year, as compared to this time last year, has 13 more certs, which is a 4% increase. And then when we go down to the last page, to the last group rather, this is a report indicating the taxable assessed value in dispute. And of course, we're going to have an increase because we increase
The values are going
the
up. yeah.
values. But and that brings us to this last report, which is the certs with the specific year at issue and the property address and name. If you, the ones that are highlighted in blue are the ones that are in the court's calendar right now, and we expect them to be settled within the next year. Last year, we didn't have a lot of cases that settled, that we were able to take off the books. We did have some cases that settled, but not as many as other years. I'll point out, if you look through this list, I'll point out to you, for example, that, you know, by the way, each one of these is one parcel, 1 year. That's one case. So, so some parcels have 3, 4, or 5 years at issue. If you look at some parcels like Ossining River Associates, we have since 2005 because of the pending proposed development. We agreed to put on hold that case, but typically cases don't linger that many years, for so many years. But in this case, because they're trying to put together a deal with the village for that property, we're hoping that once that is settled, that they withdraw these cases. My contention is, of course, that this land for this parcel is assessed properly at about, what is it, $1,451,000 approximate.
A bit of a leap,
I'm sorry?
which was a bit of a leap from the previous assessed value of 82,000.
Yeah, but the previous, that was at 5.65% of value. So it has been increasing, just like
Well,
all real estate, you know, land value has been increasing.
sure, but from 2005
Yep.
through 2015, it was stable at 82,000?
Well,
That
the
maps to
assessed value, what I was
1.4?
mentioning before, the assessed value was stable, but the
Oh, but then
equalization
the
rate,
factor, yes, okay, so their
if you
bill.
divide
their
it by
bill didn't
the
reflect that.
equalization
Okay,
rate,
Right.
you look at the next column, and that's the market value. You take the assessed value divided by the equalization
Okay.
rate. So it's basically going back in 2005 from $1,344,000. It went up, then it went down again in 2010, went up again for a
Thank
few
you.
years.
I get it.
Okay.
So actually, I should be looking at the last
should be
column,
looking at the
not
market value,
not
yeah.
not the dated
Not the-
assessed value
yes.
number, which is totally irrelevant.
So as you can see, we have some cases that are quite a few years. For example, Westerly Enterprises is a lot of small parcels there. And therefore, we have quite a few. But the ones, again, the ones that are highlighted in blue are the ones that we expect to,
I don't know, I find it interesting that, I mean, Westerly is obviously the, you know, that's the Ginsburg development, right?
No, it's DeMartis.
no. Harbor Square is the
Oh, okay.
Ginsburg.
That's 3 Westerly.
development.
So this is everything
this is-
up to,
okay.
up to the boathouse.
Got it.
It's the
By the
DeMartis.
way, the
Furnace.
case that we had with Red Lions Apartment, which was the affordable housing for the 2015 roll, we went to trial this year. And we exchanged trial appraisals, a long process. Only one, that was only for 1 year, but we did win the trial. The judge ruled on our favor. That is a costly proposition, but of course, we have to defend our assessment. So with some of these, in the process, we end up getting appraisals and in preparation for trial. Unfortunately, the way we have a very active certiorari, a group of certiorari attorneys in Westchester and Nassau County, and they just file every year. because they can.
It doesn't
So-
cost them anything to file, right? I mean,
Very
it's
little.
cheap,
$250.
Yeah, it's the filing fee. It's minimal. So typically they file without making a judgment whether the assessment is fair or not.
It feel, because we only see the ones where we have to pay out, so it feels like they win all the time. Is that not the case?
And that is not the case.
We don't see the ones where they don't win.
We don't hear
That
about
is
we don't
that
hear
is
about
not the
victories.
case. For example, recently Walgreens withdrew 3 years because we proved to them that they had no case. So you don't see those because the ones that come to you is the ones that we have to pay.
Maybe we should get more of an update on that. We'd feel better about all those ones we approve.
So Fernando, every year I felt like we've had this conversation about a law that would require, I guess, particularly classes 400 to provide an income and expense statement. Is that something that you need from us, the Village of Austin, or is that something that the town would have to put in their code in order to make that easier for you?
I would defer that to the town attorney, but I believe since the town of Ossining is the
Taxing?
assessing unit,
Okay.
I believe it probably would have to come from the town.
Okay.
Some municipalities do have it and enforce it. Some have it and do not enforce it.
What's the enforcement mechanism?
The enforcement mechanism is a penalty added to the tax bill, like in Yonkers. Some have it, like I said, I think the town of Rye has it, but it doesn't enforce it. I have mixed feeling because we already do have a group and of property owners that every year provide me with the information. When we did the reassessment, we did a mailer, and many commercial property owners provided. For example, Erstad Biddle, they always provide every year their rental, the rentals and the income and expense information.
But then them passing the law would be irrelevant to the folks who are already doing it. It would only mean that everybody
Yeah.
else who's getting away with not doing it would be held to the same standards that these folks are already upholding just because that's the way you should be
Yes.
doing business.
I do have a lot of smaller property owners with, small commercial mixed-use buildings that they come and meet with me and we go over it. The problem would be what would the enforcing mechanism be? If we do send out a list and they do not provide it by a certain time, how would we enforce?
Right?
Right, but if other communities are doing it, if other communities are enforcing it, then why wouldn't we just follow their model?
Yeah, if we're gonna do something like that, we certainly, unless you
We have to talk
enforce
to
it, why
Dana
do
and
it?
Pals on the third floor?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
What would you say is a good guesstimate for the amount of property owners that do share that information now? Just a
Particularly
guesstimate.
400. I mean, is this something for just
Just a
class
guess.
400 or all commercial?
No, this would be commercial, all commercials. It's a small percent. I would say maybe 20% do provide it. You gotta remember, we have maybe 800 commercial, townwide commercial properties.
Most don't. Okay.
But the larger commercial, which is the Erstad Biddles, the ones that file certiorari, of course, have to do it through the courts as part of the discovery. So eventually, we will get that from Avalon, from Harbor Square, the larger commercial, Monte Calfa, et cetera.
But if you had this information, right, then ideally there wouldn't be a need for them to meet you in court because you could give a better assessment.
Ideally, however,
They can still go to court.
they may not agree, we may not agree on everything. For example, the cap rate that I use versus what they think it should be. Use the vacancy rate that they show versus what it should be. Their expenses may be too high, overloaded with things that I will say, well, if we stabilize your income and expenses, the reasonable amount should be this, 15,000 for snow removal. Why are you spending 95,000, when I can see similar projects. So that's part of that exercise.
Oh, so they're like
Yes,
Show a loss?
yes.
Of course, that's common practice.
Okay.
So it's a dance, basically. It's not easy, and the idea is to, I know what the market rates are for apartments, or I could find out, some of them maybe, their income is not, is below below market, we assume competent management. And for what various reasons. So, it's not a clear-cut valuation. Basically, you look at their actuals and you say, okay, is that reasonable? Are those market rates, market rate rents, market expenses for a building that provides heat and electric, or a building where every tenant pays its own heat, et cetera. So you look at these things. So.
ETPA is going into effect now. It's going through the implementation process now. We anticipate, they've already told us, that a lot of building owners are likely to file a claim. What is the timeline when that would take effect?
Well, every year, everybody gets their opportunity to file for administrative review by grievance day, which is the third Tuesday in June. So I think in 2019, that would be June 20th, I think, or thereabouts. So,
They could file already as soon as 2019.
oh, yes.
Okay.
But
they won't really be feeling it yet very much.
if you look at this list, some of them have cases. For
Preemptively?
example, Monte Calfa.
All right, well, I mean,
Or,
yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
that, some property owners just file every 2 years or whatever.
Yes.
Anyway, that's just part of their business practice.
Yes.
So, but we anticipate it'll be a different type of filing that we might be seeing in the next year or two. Okay.
Basically,
Do you have experience
that-
with working you have experience working with an ETPA community, but if you did, it probably wouldn't have been at the time of implementation.
No, I have no experience, but basically, what I have to measure is what is their changes in their income and expenses. So basically, next year, these businesses would show me their 2018 income and expense rent roll, and I can see, how their net income has changed, and based on that, what the value. So it's not something that happens like that. What could happen like that is someone that is selling a building where the new buyer may say, well, ETPA, and therefore my income, future income generation is limited by the ETPA rules, so therefore I will pay you this much versus what you're asking. But in my view, what I'm looking for is not, the impact is not going to happen immediately. It's going to happen over a period of time. Talking to other assessors that have ETPA, basically those buildings that are that are under the ETPA rules are assessed lower because their income is limited.
They're assessed lower and lower every year, actually, because the market rate goes up, and theirs at best is almost a flat line.
For the most part, if there is a drastic market interruption where there's very high vacancy and therefore the regular buildings with not under ETPA are not able to get a rent increase because of the economy, then there wouldn't be that much change that year. But the general consensus is yes, that over the year these buildings assessed value or market value will be less than a building that is not under those rules.
So it shrinks the overall tax revenue.
No, it shifts it.
It shifts it to other,
It shifts it
to the rest of the pie, yeah.
Because it shrinks it, you have to push it to other
Yes,
people.
yes.
The homeowners.
Yeah. It's not
Not just
as,
homeowners, it's-
it's not as noticeable in an environment like this, where you have increases in taxable assessed values throughout the community, of course. But of course, it's compounded when the taxable assessed value starts decreasing. So.
The wholly, I'm sorry, were you gonna say? Tell me again, the wholly exempt are what?
The wholly exempt are your churches, your school building, municipal buildings,
Your nonprofits, right?
and nonprofits, yes.
They own the building.
Hudson Step owns their building on State Street. That's, Open Door owns their building on Main Street.
Yes.
Town, Maryknoll, Bethany, like all
I
those.
don't know,
Those are the
but
religious ones, yeah, okay. Okay.
if you look at the town exempt, you'll see probably a reduction because the former, this is just so that you can compare, the former Pace University, which was acquired by another institution, lost their exemption because they never used the building for the exempted use.
That was Briarcliff, right?
That was in Briarcliff. So that happens. In our case, we have those two additional parcels that went into the exempt, but the values of exempt properties are adjusted as well when we do adjustments to the roll. So they're not static. So part of that increase or decrease may not be because a building came in or went out of the exempt category, also because, let's say, for example, we increase the value of all those as well.
Yeah, it was two parcels.
Based on
that-
market trends.
Two fewer parcels in Briarcliff. Within a,
Two fewer parcels is.
two less wholly exempt parcels
Oh, yes.
this year
Yeah,
over
those
last
are the
year.
two former
It's both
Pace.
It's both from the
The
Pace
two
thing.
former Pace
Yeah.
parcels, yes.
So that means that the $15,197,900 of assessed value that they represent now, that's
Taxable.
taxable for them, as opposed to us, where our difference goes unfortunately in the other direction, and by even more money. We added two wholly exempt properties, so that's $24,793,800 that is no longer assessed. So that came off of our assessed value total.
Yeah, or that increase, not only two additional properties that went into the exempt, but also the valuation on the other,
Yeah.
on all of them may have come up.
And who manages that? So you look at income, revenue, et cetera, for the for-profit. Who's managing the not-for-profits if they are?
We do. Every year,
Their building is being used.
every year, we send them a renewal form, and if there is any changes in their use, they have to let us know. And if that use is not the use that they are exempted for, then it is no longer taxable. In the case of the Research Center for Natural Resources, I believe is the name of the institution that purchased the former Pace campus, they bought the property, and the property sat vacant. The building department condemned it. The electricity was cut off on the water. So there's clear evidence that the building is not being put to the exempt use. So we have to put it back on the rolls. They had the opportunity to file a grievance, which they did, and then file a certiorari, which they didn't, because they realized that they would not be able to win the case when, how could you claim that you're putting this facility to the exempted use when it sits there vacant, overgrown, and, you know, all the other safety issues that come with it? Fortunately, you know, most of our exempt properties, we do send them a renewal every year. They have to send it back. Some of the churches, because of the transition in administration, sometimes they're a little delayed, but for the most part, they all renew
So
they
for
all
the
renew
most
their.
part is, same as Omar's question, what percent actually send in your? For the
Well-
most part, sounds not 100, thank you. For the most part, doesn't sound like 100%, so.
What percentage of them do not? Well, 100% of them do send us, because we follow up and
Oh,
we make
okay,
sure
good.
that they provide us with the renewal application where they sign on the dotted line, there is no change in use.
Okay.
But, so that application is required.
Yes, that renewal is required. You know, we have cases sometimes, some of the exempted properties, for example, will rent a portion to
Oh,
a
yeah.
for-profit, and then we
Right,
have to
a
put
lot
that-
of them.
We have to put that portion as taxable.
So they're sending in a statement every year
Yes.
identifying if they are still wholly exempt or if they are, say, renting out their parking lot for profit.
It's,
In
yeah,
which case, now
identif-
they have to pay taxes as
If it's been rented for a for-profit entity, yes, then that portion becomes taxable. If you rent it for a non-for-profit and they're only recouping their costs, then it
They're
remains.
making money.
It
but
remains,
different
it
issue.
remains as exempt.
But if they're renting it to just a bunch of individuals and they're just collecting fees,
Then it becomes taxable, yes.
and if they don't identify that and they're still getting a wholly exempt, is that inappropriate behavior?
Yes,
What's the violation?
it's illegal, it's a violation, and we could remove the exemption on the total facility,
So they really shouldn't do that.
yes. You know, many cases, you know, we have a church that has cell towers, they pay
Okay.
on that.
Well, that's
We
fine, 'cause
have-
they're paying.
We have
They're
others that
acknowledging
rent, that rent
Register and
the
stuff.
basement to a pre-K school, for example, and they pay on that.
And it's not it's not a not-for-profit pre-K school.
And it's not a
So a
not-for-profit.
not-for-profit can own a property and still have to pay taxes if they're renting it to a for-profit.
Yes.
Okay. Just for me to understand, so when I look at these, the factor, and I remember I got the letter in the mail and I wasn't quite sure what it was, and suddenly my taxes were going up and my house is not in any better condition than it was last year, but apparently other people in my neighborhood are selling their homes for more money, so I'm not even sure, I didn't look up to see what neighborhood I am in here. But if I look at, the factor is by neighborhood. Now,
Yes.
ETPA buildings are in a variety of neighborhoods. Let's say a year from now, when you come and sit with us, if ETPA buildings are, well, they probably, look, so let's say 2 years from now, and they've applied, and some of them have been adjudicated, and maybe there's an impact, and the shifting is happening. Does a whole neighborhoods factor, how does that affect the neighborhood factor? If you've got a big 100.
Most of these neighborhood adjustments are for the residential properties.
This is just residential.
Residential, as you can see. The commercial property this year, we did an analysis and we changed their valuations based on the income approach. So as you can see,
So commercial's based on income.
oh, yes,
Versus.
Versus comparables in the neighborhood. Okay.
versus residential, which is a ratio analysis of the sales,
Except all of these
Produce those factors.
condos, you're listing as
commercial.
commercial. But they're on the residential, they pay a factor like a residential.
No, no, the condos.
It's pooled.
The condos valuation is based on the income approach as if they were commercial.
So what am I looking at here? I got Kemi's
So
Cove,
for
I got
example,
Hudson Point.
if you look at one of the condos, Eagle Bay,
Yeah,
got a 5% increase.
right.
So
But that's not based on comparables.
That's based on-
Each condo complex is here.
the condos would be based on rental income, because rents have been up, and expenses, yeah.
Net income,
Net income, right. Net income divided by a cap rate to come up with a,
right.
So this is private homes up to 3 units and condos. That's what this list is.
no, private home up to 3 units, commercial and condos and co-ops are all
All these neighborhoods
are done based
condos.
on the income approach.
So, but my question is, if I own an apartment building with 20 units, is it reflected in this list?
Yes, it's reflected in the commercial, depending the location, whether it's.
What number is that? C20?
That would be C20, C30, C40.
Okay, so they had a 7% rate increase
On average, yes.
on average. Now, I don't know how many parcels this includes, how many owners this includes.
It says how many parcels.
Oh, that's what this
It's-
number is,
Yeah,
117,
it says,
okay.
it says
So
how many
117,
parcel in that,
Okay,
in that
okay, so then
particular
this is my
neighborhood.
question. So commercial road, commercial main road, whatever that is, C20. There's 117 parcels.
Correct,
Some of those could be ETPA buildings,
yes,
and not all of them.
correct.
So they had a factor for 2018 of 1.7.
In this
1.07.
case, it's not a factor. In this case, it's an increase in assessed value of
Okay,
7%.
so that increase of 7% was based on the income expenses for all 117 of those parcels.
Yes, and basically what happened is we have this we have models for different property types. So when we did the analysis of the rentals, for example, we determined that for this model, the increases in rent on average was 5, 6, 7%, whatever. We applied that, and then those buildings' values were increased. In addition to that, those buildings where we get their income and expenses, we analyze it, and we adjust the assessment individually.
ETPA buildings will have a prescribed increase in income.
Yes.
So if 117, if there are 117 parcels in C20, and some of those are ETPA, and some of them are not, how is that difference in how the amounts are increasing, the income levels are increasing, going to impact?
Well, what we're going to have to do going forward, of course, is identify those buildings, and if we are going to make an adjustment to all of those, to all the buildings in that neighborhood, we have to take into consideration that those buildings, rental, only increase by that percentage.
So, but
So,
can a
so
group,
for example, we do an analysis and we say, okay, my two-bedroom apartments went up from $1,800 to $2,200 per apartment, and my ETPA only went from $1,800 to $1,850, let's say, for example.
Right.
Then we have to take that into consideration when we review the valuations of ETPA buildings.
so will ETPA become its own category, a C something?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll pull
Probably going to
out,
have, that's probably the best way to handle it in order to make sure that we
so you'll have a
don't
new,
run the risk of applying the same model to ATPA buildings that you're going to apply to
Market rate.
non-ETPA buildings.
But that's only if it's applicable to said property or said units, right? So let's say, I mean, because like we would have to see if that's the case in all the properties, right, or in all the units, or I mean, because like in the profit and loss statement, you would see that,
Right.
that there's
Well,
a,
ideally, it's best to review the individuals, whether it's ETPA or market rate. It's best to review each individual building's rent rolls and income and expenses. But let's say we're doing it without having the benefit of having the statements from those buildings, then we have to most likely create a new category or a new neighborhood for ETPA buildings.
so that's my question. So you've got 117 properties in C20 right now. Let's say 6 of them are ETPA buildings. So next year, those 6 will no longer be in C20, they'll be in CX, whatever the number
Yes.
is that you decide, and put all the ETPA buildings in there regardless of what neighborhood they're in.
Yes.
Okay, now, is it just a coincidence that the C20, C30, C40, and C50 all had a 7% increase?
No, it's not a coincidence. Basically, when we did the analysis, remember, we did not increase them at all or change their values last year. So when we did the analysis, the average turned out to be, this is the average of the end result, 7%. Some buildings went down, some went up more than 7%. But the average for that group was approximately 7%.
But then each building is being taxed individually,
Absolutely, yeah.
whereas in neighborhoods, we're being taxed on the neighborhood. That's what
Well,
you're
no,
saying.
the neighborhood factors is applied to the entire neighborhood.
Yeah.
But also, we may do adjustment to individual properties for various reasons, whether it's a building permit, or
Yeah.
whether we see that the sale happened and that property condition is worse than what we have it. That should
regardless
merit
of
a decrease.
so regardless
of the
it's still
factor, yeah.
mainly individual.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's both.
Well, yeah, it's both.
It could be
But the
impacted by it.
factor is in other words, the factor is the average for the entire population in that neighborhood. But of course, there are individual adjustments based whether they had a building permit, whether there's a condition decrease or increase.
But most of us are flying under the radar, and we're not doing anything, the building department's not paying attention, we're not selling our house, and nobody's looking.
Right.
So if
So
my
that
neighborhood
would've
went up
been
by
just the factor.
3%, my neighbor went up 3%, we went up 3%, and that'll be the case for most places.
Yes.
ETPA buildings, it's not gonna be the case, because they're gonna make you pay attention.
Yes. I'm hoping that many of these ETPA buildings share the information with us.
Don't they have to if they're gonna try and get a reduction?
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
Many of them will just turn to their lawyers, and their lawyers will
Yeah,
file a case.
yeah.
And when we have 3 or 4 years accumulated, then we'll sit down and,
Yeah, I mean, most of them, if they're actually being, honest about what they're saying, they have no problem showing or opening the books to you. Others will just sue, which is, it's up to them, and they're right, so.
when do you expect to have a final list of the buildings that are going to be?
DHCR.
It's not in our hands.
It's the state that has to
Is the
figure that
state?
out.
Yeah, DHCR is the one who does the inventory.
It has started, well, the process has started, so we'll,
So, I'll contact them and try to
Debbie and Stuart have
get
been
as
more-
much
have been-
information as I can from
Debbie and
them.
Stuart have their finger a little more on the pulse of exactly how that's progressing.
Yes.
I know December 4th is a date by which they have told the landlords to register. I don't know how much progress they've made toward getting that to happen, or what exactly the enforcement will be to make that happen.
When you receive a rent roll, particularly for apartment buildings, is it just one lump sum, or do they break it down by each apartment?
If I get the rent roll, it's in each apartment.
Okay.
The monthly rent and whether it was vacant or not. And then, of course, when I get the income and expense, you get the total for that year, total income, total expenses for this. And that's what we review to determine whether, the expenses are, the rents are market rents or below market, and whether the expenses are fair and reasonable.
And so the only time that you get that is either when you're in court or when someone decides to come to you. Like,
Yes.
Just give it to-
Someone, let's say in January, this owner calls me, my taxes are too high, usually that's what they say. And I say, fine, let's set up an appointment, bring your income and expense, or email them to me, and we'll get together and we'll discuss them.
And the-
Usually, I prefer if they email me the information, I review it, and when we get together, I have reviewed it and see what questions I need to ask, and then make a determination. And if it merits a decrease, they absolutely get it
and of course,
on the next tentative roll.
and of course, the rent roll identifies whether it's a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, or so on and so on.
Yes.
7% seems so high for all these commercial properties to have their factor
They're making
increase.
money.
yeah, don't forget that, there's so many factors when you have a commercial property. I mean, one of the biggest one that I don't want to single anyone out, but in Austin and Barcliff, there's a reason why they leave a lot of storefronts, vacant for a year. I mean, it all goes down to the profit and loss statement end of the year, what they could, so there's a lot of factors. I mean, I know it seems high, but it's a,
Well, they had 0 last year, and now they have a 7%. But
They have-
ETPA buildings are getting either a 0 or a 1% increase next year. That's what the county's decided.
1%?
1% for a 2-year lease, 0% for a 1-year lease. So that's a big difference.
Yeah, if everybody else is getting, I know, I had one gentleman that rents a building that is going to be ETPA, and he was trying to find out, I know he spoke to Stuart, because he got like a 7 or 8% increase on the new lease. And of course, ETPA, we knew that ETPA, his increase was gonna be limited to, I thought at the time, maybe 2% or less.
yeah, there's gonna have to be something, it's still too new, and even when everyone is registered, there's still gonna be some enforcement to get people to register, enforcement to get people to follow, and, the county and the state will have to deal with that. We need to make sure that the resident or the village just, or your office reports entities that are not complying, so, yeah.
Well, they're not complying with HID, they have to comply with the state,
The
right?
state don't know who's not
Yeah.
complying because
Right.
it's their
Doesn't
list.
really-
I mean, it's pretty clear cut, 6 units and up, built prior to
Oh, yeah, I know, it's very.
73. However, where the questions come up is buildings that are mixed use, that have a commercial component, and 6 units. Are they supposed to be in ATPA? Do you know?
Yes.
Yes?
There's 6
Buildings that are under a housing agreement to provide
No.
already affordable income? No.
No, basically Snowden House and Maple
Northern
House,
House,
Maple
no,
Place,
they're
they're fine.
already, Red Lions
Maple House.
Apartments, okay.
Yes, they're not
Now,
part of it.
buildings that have a 20% component,
They're included, but there aren't any.
included.
Show me, do we have a building that has a 20% set aside?
next door. That building has, I think, 14 units, and it has a 20%, I believe, affordable. So two,
No,
No.
10% maybe.
10% maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
Two of
highest.
the units are lower than market rate. That building is going to be in
I believe so. I mean,
ETPA
you
for the
provi-
remainder
You're
units.
the one who created the list for us, and right now,
Well, yeah,
almo-
no,
list
I
that
have
you
that
pro-
list, of course, but
Right.
I'm trying to determine, I'm gonna have, next year when I come back to you, I'm hoping to say, neighborhood C, whatever. C ETPA, for example, has 150 buildings and, you know, 150
Parcels.
parcels, and that one is getting 0 increase or 1% increase, whatever it is. But I'm gonna need to identify those buildings.
The HCR will,
Well,
Yeah, that might actually be the easiest thing.
yeah,
yeah, they're the
okay.
ones that are gonna have the real information, because they're gonna make the determinations building by building to either accept any grievances or make any decisions about whether they're gonna be part of the program.
Well, grievances about whether or not they're going to be part of the program, but tax assessment grievances are the same for them
No,
as
but
Yeah,
they
well.
that's
can-
the
they
same
can
for
grieve
everyone.
their status as an ETP eligible.
Yeah,
apartment.
oh, okay,
And
yeah.
they-
Apartment building, so. I mean,
And they're gearing up for that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. More questions? Because we're 2 hours
Okay.
behind.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Fernando.
Thank
Very
you.
much,
You have
Fernando.
have any questions, please send me an email. Be happy to help you out. Thank you again. Have a good weekend if I don't
You
see
too.
you.
Appreciate
I
it.
don't see you. Happy Thanksgiving,
Same here.
yes.
Thank you.